Hello, hello. This is the 206th Test from the Future, an experimental podcast from the year 2225, which we are sending from our present to yours. My name is Dirk.
And my name is Simon.
And we're putting the past in podcast. So, today is a little bit less about technology, a little bit more a history lesson.
Yep. Nice bit of history for our listeners. But before that, I wanted to just make sure. Did you see the traffic news earlier?
No, I wasn't paying attention.
Okay, you should probably check that. There's going to be some maintenance going on with the teleporter network. And so that might affect you getting home. So maybe take that into account.
Now that you mentioned this, they announced this a few weeks ago. It's just in the greater Frankfurt area, right?
Right, yeah.
Okay, yeah, they were saying this could result in delays and cancellations. Is that tonight?
Yeah, tonight. Starting tonight.
Okay. Well, depending on how long we need, then if it's still on when we're done, can I take your hoverboard?
Yeah, of course.
Still working, right?
It is still working, yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks for pointing it out.
No worries.
But we have a history lesson.
Exactly, a proper history lesson for us. So history for us, future stuff for our listeners.
Yeah, exactly. But we often speak about the 23rd century and we send it to the 21st century. And this is about something that happened in between.
Yeah, well, so within the right at the end of the 21st century.
Yeah, true. Actually closer to where the listeners are than where we are.
Yes.
End of the 21st century, yeah.
Don't know the exact dates, but let's say 70 to 80 years after their time.
Yep, something like
60, 70, something like that anyway. And sure, we are like 120 odd years or onwards from that.
So what are we talking about?
Global cooling.
Exactly.
And listeners, I think, have asked us about it before. We've
several times, yeah. Yeah, so, it was a big thing back then, and we've occasionally mentioned it, and people still ask us about it occasionally. Either, how did you deal with global warming?
Right.
Or if they've actually heard us talking about global cooling, how did this actually work?
Sure, what even is global cooling? What was it?
Yeah. So first, a really brief recap. So what is this even, global cooling? It's basically the reaction to global warming. So after many years of global warming, the Earth started cooling down again, up to a point where things starting to get a little chilly.
Too cold even.
Too cold, exactly. And this happened because in the 21st century, people were getting a little bit worried about the global warming. As we can see from the emails that we get from our listeners, or some of our listeners are slightly worried about this as well. So all kinds of measures were kick-started to deal with global warming, to halt it. And a lot of them worked really well. And a lot of them worked better than expected. Things started cooling down and then started keeping on cooling down.
Right. Like getting exactly colder than even it had been. Like the goal was simply to get it back to the same temperature as at the beginning of before the Industrial Revolution. And this was getting it colder than that.
Exactly. And that's the phase that was known as global cooling. So that's the thing that we wanted to talk about. I think it might make sense before we basically continue this storyline. So what happened then after all of these years? What were these initial measures? Because that's basically the bit that's closest to where our listeners are, I guess.
Right.
So what were some of these measures that all these smart 21st century people came up with to deal with global warming?
Yeah. And so, exactly. Let's go through some of those. And I just wanted to point out, I think any one of these by itself probably would have been more than effective enough.
Yeah.
But of course, they couldn't know that when they started them. So it was kind of the idea, okay, things are just getting too hot. We've got to try everything we can.
Exactly.
And hopefully one of them will stick. And they obviously didn't count on,
basically
all of them.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the thing. And they didn't want to wait. Let's just try this for a decade and then try the other thing for a decade. No, let's try everything at the same time. And then they put some thought in it. And most of them worked.
Yeah. And so exactly, let's talk about them. This one was pretty funny, was the idea. So they wanted to encourage so basically ice in drinks was subsidized.
Yeah.
So that if you had a drink that had ice in it, you only had to pay for the drink part.
Yeah.
So if the drink was mostly ice, that's a very cheap drink.
Yeah. So if you ordered a cranberry juice with ice, you just, like you mentioned. And then if you could basically say, 3/4 of ice, you get a lot of ice cubes, a little bit of cranberry juice.
Exactly. Just drizzle some cranberry juice over it. That's it.
Yeah. And the trick apparently was to drink really slowly. So you kept having juices, just less and less cranberry juice taste. Yeah.
Yep.
So I think that was...
it was like a subtle one that everyone could do like in their daily lives.
And also because it made things cheaper. This has forever been an argument to humans. If it's cheaper, let's do it.
Yep.
Because it's not just good for the climate, it's also good for your wallet.
Right. Oh, and actually, to make it clear for the listeners, how did this help with global warming? Sure, you've got more ice around.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, there's more ice. So things in general...
Makes things cool.
Yeah, so if it's one drink with one ice cube, it doesn't really make much of a difference. But if this was global, so all around the world, all drinks with ice were cheaper. And you could actually order a drink with just ice, just a glass of ice cubes, and this was free. So ice cubes.
Effectively, it was just tap water that had been frozen. So yeah,
frozen tap water. But then this just meant that everything everywhere became cooler, indoors, outdoor, everywhere. My favorite, because it's still there, is the World Outdoor Ice Hockey League, the WOIL.
Yeah.
This was started then, so this didn't exist before that. Before that, most of the ice hockey was actually done indoors.
Okay.
Yeah, so funny enough, they were doing ice hockey indoors because it was easier to get an ice rink going indoor because you have a climatized, closed environment.
Right, like controlled environment. You don't have the sun beating down, melting the ice.
Exactly, and not bother with rain or I don't know, snow. I guess snow is a good thing, but whatever. But then they just, they needed more energy. But then they could have these outdoor ice hockey fields everywhere, and especially in warm areas. So this was from Yemen to Bangladesh. They had ice hockey fields everywhere in areas where normally there was no ice. And this was also heavily subsidized, obviously, by the United Nations and several countries. And of course, again, you could make money with it because it's sports.
Right.
People watch it, you get advertisement and so on. It goes so heavily promoted. And it was also doing something for a good cause. So watching a game, watching a WOIL game was actually good for the environment. So you could actually say, I'm sitting on a couch watching sports and helping the environment. So this was another measure that was working really well because it was super popular, and it's still going on.
Right.
And it's also like it's ice hockey, but all the big sports teams are actually around the equator. Yeah, all them the most successful.
That's where
teams.
all the ice rinks got built.
Yeah,
and exactly, especially the huge ones, and they're still going.
Yeah. Exactly. So, I think they celebrated their 150th anniversary recently. So they've been around for a while now. But as far as sports is concerned, they're older than pipe racing, but they're younger than, for example, football. Apparently.
Sure.
Are you watching the WOIL?
Occasionally. I don't follow it super closely, but I enjoy watching it.
Did you see some of the matches in the last World Cup?
That was earlier this year?
Yeah.
Or was that?
No, hold on. No, that was already last year.
Then I think I missed it.
Okay. It's that was with the final Equatorial Guinea against Papua New Guinea. That was the Guinea final.
I see. Yeah. Right. I do remember. I didn't watch it, but I remember it now.
Yeah, that was. They even made a song about it afterwards. To be honest, it was really fun, and I can't remember which of the Guineas won. No, I can't remember the song. I can't remember who won.
The games. Yeah,
I'm trying to remember now. But anyway, anyway. World Outdoor Ice Hockey League. That's what it stands for. Why? Yeah.
Indeed. So these two we've mentioned so far, they involve basically putting more ice into the water.
Yeah, use energy to make ice.
Exactly. And I guess this next one, so ionic cooling engines were installed at both the North and the South Pole. And that's the thing where you have basically these huge metal plates, and they submerge them, under the water. If they could, like shifted them under existing icebergs, run power to them, and it freezes the water. So again, it's making more ice, but not in the sense of like just adding ice cubes or making ice rings, but literally refreezing the poles.
And that's where the ice was supposed to be, right?
Exactly,
so for a while there was no ice at the poles.
Or much less than there had been, exactly.
Yeah.
And this was a way of re-establishing them.
Okay, so this, I guess, is a more natural solution.
Yeah.
Of putting the ice back where it belongs. Okay.
Was the thinking, yeah.
See, you did some research, because this one I didn't know. I knew about the space locusts.
The silver ones, yeah?
Yeah, the silver space
Yeah.
locust.
Those were pretty fancy.
How did that work exactly?
So huge swarms of locusts, so not actual insects, but rather mechanical ones, small robot ones. Silver on their backs, and these huge swarms went up into orbit, like not here, like where people are, but super high up. And basically, they reflected the sunlight, back out into space. And the reason they were robots, so that they could coordinate, because you don't literally just want to make it dark, you'd have no sunshine coming through, so they could be shifted closer together, further apart, to let more or less light through.
Right.
But in the end, it was huge swarms of silver locusts flying through space, or in orbit.
Kind of like space blinds that you could open and close.
Venetian blind. Is it Venetian blinds, the kinds you tilt?
I have no idea.
Blinds that
I haven't
you
been
can
to
tilt.
Venice in a while.
Sure, likewise. But either way, exactly, like blinds up in space made of silver locusts.
Yeah, funny. I did remember the space locusts also because, spoiler, they're also still around.
Indeed.
Some of them anyway.
Yeah.
That was a very... I mean, that's accompanying the news, that has been accompanying the news for a while, also after global cooling, because they kept on popping up
in the news,
because they were a solution and then maybe became a problem, I guess, at some point.
At some point. But so the first three we mentioned involve ice.
Yep.
Making basically cold, so getting water and freezing it. And this was a different approach. This was stopping as much solar energy from reaching the surface of the Earth, or even getting into the atmosphere of the Earth.
The other ones were cooling, and this one was just reducing the warming, I guess. Yeah, so these were some really creative and, as it turned out, really effective measures. So for me, this is definitely too long ago, so I had to look that up. But the moment we got back to our starting point as far as temperature is concerned, so back to the temperature we had before the Industrial Revolution.
Like I mentioned earlier, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. In the 19th century, that was celebrated quite massively, as I understood it.
Yeah. People hadn't thought it possible, yeah. Hence them throwing all these different approaches at it.
Exactly. And of course, they saw it coming, right? Because of the global temperature was kind of monitored, and they saw, wow, the temperature has been rising year by year. At one point, it started...
first, its growth slows down, so it was getting hotter, less hot as far, you know what I mean, yeah? The growth was slowing. Then at some point it plateaued.
Yeah. And at that point, there were lots of parties.
Exactly.
Themed like Industrial Revolution, as far as...
or like the 10 years before or something.
Yeah, something like
that. Or a couple of decades before.
Exactly. Dress code from right that time.
Yeah. So, for example, you could imagine an Industrial Revolution style would be, hey, you got to dress like you're working in a factory.
Yeah.
No, this is the style before factories even existed.
Yeah. I guess Renaissance or so. What was the period before that?
Don't know.
Or the
Renaissance was in Italy, so...
yeah, but it's spread out. Or was there something between Renaissance or Industrial Revolution? I'm
not so up to date on my history.
Wasn't there like romanticism, or is that like a painting style? Anyway,
well,
countryside.
Literary style?
I'm just imagining people in a countryside with umbrellas and high hats.
I see.
Probably something like that. Before Industrial Revolution. Yeah, so these were... Also, the Industrial Revolution is the point where people started working more.
Right, exponentially more, yeah.
Exactly.
So up until that point, it was like, of course people work. You do enough work to get by, and you're good. And with the Industrial Revolution, instead, it was like, hey, there were factories. People who ran the factories needed workers, and they needed to work them as hard as they could because there just weren't enough workers. So, a very different approach to life.
Yeah. But I think those parties lasted for a couple of days. And again, then people in the weeks afterwards started to realize that the cooling wasn't stopping.
Right. Right. It had plateaued, but then it started cooling and like getting colder and colder.
Yeah, exactly. So even colder than right before the Industrial Revolution. And
I think at first, it was wintertime at that point. So, okay, you noticed it getting colder, but maybe it's just a colder winter than usual. But then when it was meant to be springtime, it was still too cold, and persisted.
Exactly. And this was global. So places that were really warm were less warm, and places that were coolish were even colder. And places that were cold already were colder. This is, this is not something I've definitely experienced myself, or maybe I have. But this is from stories that I've been told. So not any more history lessons. So I've.
Oh, you mean like firsthand, like from older relatives?
People that experienced this. Right. Yeah. You remember any?
Yeah, as a kid, I remember exactly those winters being like amazingly cold, like so much snow, snot freezing in my nose, like ice crystals in my nose when I was just walking along, I'd breathe in and then, my nose feels funny, squeeze my nostrils together like that, and it would go crunch, crunch, crunch. Felt pretty nice. So some very cold winters indeed. I'm remembering the winters, but yeah, okay, the whole year was much cooler than I was used to.
I've seen photos of the time of, let's say, places that look way different now. Because, spoiler, we've dealt with it by now, but at the time things were a lot cooler. And I remember they had all kinds of tall buildings had ice caps on top of them. One thing that stands out is the Gherkin in London.
Right.
That's
a dark green, so it was especially noticeable that it had ice on the tip of it.
Exactly. It seemed like somebody had sprinkled powdered sugar on top of it or something like that. But I've seen those pictures. Apparently it was like that permanently.
And any other like snow like buildings, which most buildings don't usually have snow on them, unless they're.
It was funny enough because it was clearly a little bit higher in the Earth atmosphere. It was quickly getting colder, so that's why the top of the buildings were more affected than the ground level. What's this massive robot statue in Osaka?
Mega Chibi Robo.
Yeah, true. This also was completely covered in snow at the top.
Right. Like on. Like the statue is holding like this big plug socket above its head, and so that plug socket was the thing that was covered in snow.
Yeah. And the statue is still there, but apparently how it looks like right now is how it initially looked like when it was constructed.
Right, without the powdery white top.
Exactly, but in the middle during global cooling, this was covered in snow. Yeah. But there were all kinds of odd things happening because like the cooling was happening way faster than like in natural history, because Earth has been warming and cooling.
Sure, right. There have been times in the past where it cooled down, but it was never so rapid.
Exactly. Did you know that Grand Bahama, that's off the coast of Brazil?
Yeah, right.
Initially it was with the rest of the Bahamas.
From the name, that makes sense.
Yeah, because this was this massive glacier, and this pushed it out, basically. Because there were glaciers forming everywhere, and oceans and lakes and valleys.
So I didn't know about that, and that makes much more sense. Because I always wondered, like, why is there this Grand Bahama over here, and then the other Bahamas over there?
Yeah,
so they used to be together, you're saying?
It used to be, exactly. There's still one country, just it's a little odd where one of the islands of the country is somewhere completely different in the world, because initially it wasn't. It was just this massive glacier that appeared during global cooling that pushed Grand Bahama all the way down to the coast of Brazil. So just imagine how cold it was.
To make such a huge glacier that it was possible for it to shift a whole island.
Yeah.
That is pretty dang cold. And then it being so cold, and we mentioned already, the ice caps being refrozen. So cool. Where's that water? So the idea was to reduce sea levels as well. It wasn't just to make the air cooler, but also to stop the sea levels rising, which worked. Then they started going down again, and then they started going down again before where they had ever been. Well, not ever, but at least in recent history. And so then you had docks and harbours and fishing places where lots of fishing boats were and everything. And okay, now all of a sudden they're landlocked.
Yeah.
Because the coast now is like much further out.
People claim you could walk to England from France.
Yep.
I haven't seen any actual evidence of that.
No, I mean, it's not the case now, so
Yeah.
maybe that was just a rumor, or something someone made up for fun. But like also between like Europe and so over near the North Pole, like between Europe and America.
Yeah, they were saying that.
I lost track actually. I didn't try it myself back then.
Okay, but sea levels definitely were lower.
Yeah, right. And then sure that in one way, so it helped out, like because the sea levels have been rising for quite a while, so many people had been becoming more and more concentrated.
Yeah,
like having to move further inland, and now all of a sudden it was the inverse. Hey, there's actually even more land to spread out into, but not straight away. Yeah, you want to make sure. Okay, but are the sea levels actually going to stay down, or is it going to come back?
Isn't that when they found Atlantis?
Correct. Yep. Right, not the.
Not Atlantis 2, right?
What's it called when you have a park? Theme park. Not the theme park.
Yeah.
But the actual original place that the theme park was based on.
Yeah, so that's how they found it. Because the sea levels dropped and hey, there seems to be a city down here. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course your regular shipwrecks with treasure and all that good stuff.
Regular.
Titanic.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, so everybody got to visit the Titanic for a change. So it's pretty cool, yeah. Yeah, so how do we stop that?
Right, because okay, first, great, stop the global warming. Now you've got the opposite problem.
How to stop global cooling?
Exactly. And I mean, I'm just thinking through the list we have here. I like the one where hot Sahara sand was just dropped everywhere, scooped up.
Yeah.
Scooped up by planes, by drones, by whoever. And then quickly, while it's still hot, flown over the places which were, way too much ice.
Yeah.
Drop the hot sand on them.
Everywhere. It was like, as far as I understood, a steady pour of hot sand wherever you were. Yeah, that was...
It was a little short-sighted because once the snow had melted, then you've got a whole bunch of sand there, but okay.
Yeah, then, I mean, as I think this story illustrates, we'll deal with it, then.
Next, yeah.
Let's just fix this problem.
No, actually, it's a bit altruistic. It's like it's providing opportunities for future folk to have something to do.
Exactly.
If you solve every problem perfectly, then there's nothing left for other people.
Exactly, and then you can think about a really proper solution for a long time, or just fix this and then figure out how to deal with the other things later. I like where they held Summer Olympics every year for a while. Instead of every 4 years, they had Summer Olympics every year.
Yeah, right.
How cool is that?
It made a lot of sense, yeah?
Yeah.
Encourage the sunshine.
I'm saying, how cool is that? How hot is that?
How balmy.
Yes, exactly. And we just mentioned the WOIL before, the World Outdoor Ice Hockey League. Then they started the Badminton Outdoor Inferno League, the BOIL.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. They had to make special shuttlecocks. I mean, that was the point of it, It was to warm up everything. So the shuttlecock itself emitted huge amounts of heat.
Yeah.
And left a fire trail through the sky as it, was hit from side to side.
Yeah. Fire-resistant rackets.
Of course,
and everybody playing in swimming trunks.
Because exactly, they were sweating a lot from the heat. And of course, the occasional, severe burn when a shuttlecock hit one of the players, but usually it was okay.
It's a pretty hardcore sport. Yeah, and it still is because, spoiler,
of course,
it's still going on. Although it didn't got to the popularity levels of the WOIL.
Not quite, but it's still pretty popular.
Yeah, it's true, yeah.
I think folk like the danger.
And we've mentioned the locusts before.
Indeed, and they...
So we wanted to...
Worked?
Yeah, exactly. So we wanted to stop them doing what they were doing, and then...
They refused.
Yes.
They'd been up there a long time. They'd really got good at what they did. They were happy, to be adjusted, like, okay, open up a bit over there, close up a bit over there. But they didn't want to just stop.
Yeah.
They liked what they did. And so, sure, then that was one of Laura Keats' first big opportunities.
Yeah,
that was the start of cleaning up space junk.
Yeah, exactly. That's the starter with cleaning up massive amounts of locusts.
Yeah, and exactly, to describe them as junk is a bit rude.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing people said when they didn't like that the space locusts weren't listening to them.
Yeah.
And that worked, sure. Scooping up.
Yeah.
Not necessarily every single one of them, but,
a lot.
Taking them out of orbit, let enough sunlight through to warm things up again.
I mean, and that said, most of these things worked, And then at one point we got back to, let's say,
right.
I keep on saying 0. It's not 0. It's
not 0 Celsius, but basically back to base level, I guess.
Yeah, base level. That's probably
pre-industrial level global temperature.
Yeah.
Got back there. And then because there isn't, at that point, so what had made everything so hot in the first place was so much pollution. But those sources of pollution were no longer active. So there was way less stuff being put into the atmosphere. So once it got to the level that was necessary, and then, you get rid of the space locust, it's not like everything suddenly got hot again.
Yeah.
It's more leveled out.
And but of course we've learned from our previous mistakes, and now there's a whole bunch of paranoid people really carefully watching the numbers, getting really worried when it's like 0.1 degree in one direction or the other.
Yep. I mean, especially that first. I mean, the people who lived through that, they were the most paranoid. Like at that point, it wasn't paranoia. Yeah, like they were keeping an eye on it. At this point, it feels like paranoia. Folk who've literally not been through this, or if they were through it, was as kids.
And as long as we're not starting some other crazy sports league or whatever, we should be fine for now.
Yeah, and actually, paranoia is a bit too harsh a word. Yeah, I guess it's a matter of faith for them. They know that it could happen again, and even though because of how we live, it seems very unlikely, but they keep an eye on it nonetheless.
Yeah. But it's good to know that they're there and they're watching the numbers. That just in case we're veering off too much in one direction or the other, then we still subsidize icy drinks a bit more, or have another additional World Cup in one sports league or another,
whichever's appropriate.
Yeah. So we're roughly back at base level, but there are still some funny side effects. Like there's still some things that remain from all of us.
Side effects of cooling back down, you mean?
Yeah,
or I guess the initial, both, like the initial going much hotter and then the much colder and now back to normal.
Exactly, and we're still back at base level, but still around the world, apparently there are still some oddities.
Yeah.
This is apparently the Statue of Liberty. The ice cream cone that she's holding.
Yeah. Right.
This was initially apparently a torch.
Like with a flashlight type torch or a flaming.
Fire. Apparently, she was initially holding a torch and not an ice cream cone.
Okay, but ice cream cone makes much more sense with all that snow.
Yeah,
that's always there.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Wait, is it because it's so cold there, or because it's so hot there, and the ice cream is because people like ice cream?
I think it's neither. I think the temperature is exactly how it's supposed to be.
Okay.
But it basically changed from a torch to a cone. I don't know if it was a natural process or some construction or whatever, but or maybe it was just inspired by the whole thing. And then,
right. Maybe some vandals is a bad word, but basically people would put some spray paint, maybe spray painted the torch to look like an ice cream cone,
or maybe officially, maybe to celebrate that we got cooler again, or that we got warmer again, or whatever. Maybe it was really official. I don't know. It's like I've always known it like that, but apparently initially it was a torch.
Okay,
and now it's an ice cream cone.
Yeah. I mean, so sure that's a. I mean, if you live around there, it's big. You spot it when you go by. But something that's available the whole world over. It's this really popular cocktail called the Sahara Iceberg.
Ah, is it from that time, the Sahara Iceberg?
Or at least inspired by it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, makes sense because there's ice and sand in it.
I mean, tasty sand, yeah.
Yeah. But maybe that's how it initially got started, because people had sand in their cocktails all over the world anyway because of the Sahara sand dropping. Right. And then a lot of people were like, "Ooh, I have sand in my cocktail," and some people were like, "This is actually pretty good." I like it. The Grander Canyon in Siberia.
Right. It's the one where you can fit 5 of the regular Grand Canyons inside of it. Yeah.
Exactly. But the Grander Canyon is a lot younger. Apparently, it's from this time. Warming up, cooling down, warming up, cooling down. At one point, it's cracked.
Split it open. Yeah.
Yeah, to split it open. Yeah. So apparently, that's how it. It's a result of global warming and global cooling. Yeah, and a very appropriate name. So the U.S. has the Grand Canyon, Russia has the Grander Canyon.
Indeed. Like I said, it is much larger. Makes sense. We mentioned the silver space locusts just a moment ago. And, Slovak heat was able to scoop up most of them. Some did escape.
Right.
And they said, forget this, if you humans are going to come up and mess with us, we're off. And so they went to Mars. Close enough.
True.
It's close by enough, to Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Got to Mars, set up shop at the poles, started making liquid water. Not making it, but basically making the temperature suitable for liquid water to form. But then, so they let it flow around a bit, and then, seems intentional, then they were like, actually, no, never mind, and made it really cold, even colder than it normally was, by flipping themselves over again.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the liquid water that they had allowed to form on Mars, all of a sudden froze again, but this time up on the surface, rather than deep underground. So you've got these huge ice bars.
Ah, yeah, that's how they got the ice bars.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
But are the ones that they keep on freezing, unfreezing, frying, unfrying? Those ones?
Yeah, those are the ones, yeah.
Okay. They're the deep fried Mars bars.
Exactly, that's what they're called.
Okay. And then you know this oasis in the Kalahari Desert where it's constantly snowing? You've seen this?
It's one of those oddity things.
Exactly.
All the regular air around it, climate, where everything's great, and there's this one spot.
Yeah, where it's snowing, and then the snow is falling, but it's melting.
Right, it never touches the ground.
Yeah, exactly. So there's no snow on the ground. If you're in the oasis, you're standing in snow, like the snow is around you. Yeah. I would say that's about it for global cooling. We also had a pretty long listener question, but because we've been going on for quite a while, I would suggest we move this one over to a future episode.
Yeah, that sounds fair. We can answer that next time.
Okay.
Okay, but then, listeners to Test from the Future, please send an email to michaellasagna5@gmail.com. Put the number 206 in the subject line. And if you want to tell us anything you want to tell us, put that in the email itself. Send that our way, and then we'll know this episode successfully went back in time.
All right. I think I'm going to get a Sahara Iceberg. But for now, thanks for listening to this cool episode, and see you in 200 years.
Bye-bye.